Welcome to Goodbye Apathy, a podcast about what excites us in life, those passions that get us out of bed in the morning, and where we find joy. Today I talk with Kimberly Burns about fashion design and where she finds inspiration to stay creative and motivated. Hey Kim, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was where your interest in fashion started. Do you remember, how old you were when you started thinking about that?
No, mostly because I don't remember a time when I didn't love clothes.
Okay.
Uh, so just from when I was really little, before I even remember, I know my mom has told me that she always let me and my sister choose what we wanted to wear
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. So I think probably my creative expression probably started there. And then just like from when my memory bank starts, I remember loving in dress up clothes. So like I had so many costumes and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't even have to be like a princess or whatever. It could just be like something fancy or something weird, or I don't know. I had a shark costume that I loved, just like anything. And then as I got older, I started to get really into like everyday fashion magazines. And once the internet was a thing, look at shows online and everything. And like, I remember there being specific articles of clothing from my childhood that I loved so much. Like, there was a pair of floral wide leg velvet pants that got passed down to me from my cousin. I was probably young to wear them and they were probably super long on me, but I loved those pants. Like, I have like staple articles of clothing throughout my life that I remember.
Okay.
So I think it just came from like really identifying with what I wore and
Yeah.
like using it to kind of like try to tell the world who I was, even from a really young age when I didn't know I was doing
Yeah.
that.
It was like inherent.
Yeah. And I just like, I've always loved textures and the feel of fabrics.
Okay.
So really soft or like really, I don't know, rough or something, like just everything in between. I've always liked raised surfaces. So
Okay.
like embroidery and beads and all sorts of stuff. Just always like, even from a little kid, just like loved those kind of things. And then when I got older and into high school and I kind of became more conscious of what fashion was and what the industry was, I just like, I would sit and study fashion shows every time it was fashion week. Like, that's what I was doing. I was on, I didn't have a smartphone yet, so I would come home from school and like be on vogue.com and be combing through shows and like going picture by picture, which sounds kind of obsessive when you say it like that, but like I just loved it. So when it came time to like what I was going to do in college, it was kind of like, I don't even remember picking my major. I just
It was just there.
went, yeah, I just went to school for fashion. Like, it was just
Yeah.
what I'm going to do. And
That's
then,
really cool.
yeah. And then after college, when I got into theater and costuming, because I also always had this love for entertainment. So I was like, well, I'll either go into fashion or costume and I'll figure that out later. Um, so when I did theater, I kind of discovered my love for period costuming. And I was like, oh, well, I've also always loved history and reading and stories. So maybe I really like fashion history. So ever since I worked at the theater, I've like really dove pretty deep into that world. And I think that's kind of like all coming together into this really like love for the subject that I have.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Were you a theater kid in school at all?
No, I went
No?
to, unfortunately, no. I always wanted to be, and I had this like secret desire to be like an actress or something.
Yeah.
But I got in my head really, really early that you had to be like born to do it. Like, I think, I don't know. I just thought that if you weren't doing it by the time you were little, like you weren't any good at it or whatever. That and my schools were so small, they didn't have drama programs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I didn't know community theater was a thing because my parents weren't into theater or anything like that. And so we just like, it just wasn't in my realm.
Sure.
Uh, and I didn't know about it until like honestly later in high school, which seems crazy because I feel like nowadays community theater is like really, really big, but
Yeah.
especially being I lived in a small town in New Hampshire for like my junior high and high school years. So not too much exposure to the arts and things like that, unfortunately. So no, I was not a drama kid. I did choir.
Okay.
And I can't sing, so go figure. But
I did choir too. I shouldn't have. I I remember one recital. I think it was like the day of. I told my mom, I was like, "Oh, by the way, I have a solo," and she was like, "You what?" And I remember afterwards, she was like, "Kevin, I got to be honest, that wasn't terrible. I was really nervous." She goes, "I don't know why they would have given you a solo."
that's hilarious.
I totally get that.
You know what though? I lied a little bit because when I was in elementary school, when I lived in California, I was in so I went to a private Christian school and there was a group called His Kids, and it was a like the organization that you would join that would put on like the school plays every year, but you had to be a certain age or a certain, I don't know. I remember like waiting to be in His Kids. I was like, oh, 1 year and I can be in His Kids. But we did like a play twice a year, I think. And I never had a solo in that one, but I did do like little tiny things. But that was like, I was like 6, you know, I didn't like do
Yeah.
theater.
No, I gotcha.
Stuff
That's
every
really
kid.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't think about that because like now thinking back at our middle school and high school, like our drama program was pretty large. Like I remember there being plays and musicals all the time. And when I got to high school, I actually I was the president of the art club. So you got that information for you.
That's
But
awesome.
there were like 4 members. But we used to volunteer to paint the sets for the upcoming shows, which I actually loved. I thought it was super fun. So I got to hang out on stage and they would rehearse and then I would just be back there painting and stuff. It was pretty
Yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like when I did choir, the reason I did choir actually was because at the school I finished high school at, you did a big, what do they call it, a dinner show at the
Okay.
end of the year. And it was like the one kind of theatrical production. It wasn't a play or a musical. It was literally just, it was like a variety show, right? So every
Cool.
year they would have a theme. So ours was when I was a senior, because I only did it my senior year. It was a TV dinner show. So it was like all sorts
Cool.
of songs from theme, or like theme songs from shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember going up to my choir teacher and I was like, well, if you're doing Laverne and Shirley, like maybe we could do this or that, and like, and then if you're doing like the Muppets, we could do this and like all these suggestions and stuff. She was like, well, do you want to be like Laverne or Shirley? Like, do you want to be the person on stage singing? And I was like, no. Funny because I'm like, maybe that's why I work backstage.
Yeah. Do you regret that? Like if you could go backwards, would you have done it?
Oh, probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Because now I'm like, oh, at least like some point in my life, I think I want to do like be in a community theater show. Like, I don't want to do anything like too high level. Not that I would
Yeah.
be able.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said that, but I still would like to be on stage for something, just because I think I don't know, when you're in the arts, I think performing is, I feel like it's something you should do. Like if you even have a little bit of interest in it, like just do it like once or
Yeah.
twice just to get that perspective, you know? Because like
Yep.
I'm not really in theater anymore. But like when I was, I think it's important to know where performers are coming from and stuff.
Yep.
Just to have that perspective. I got a little taste of it when I worked at the theater in Jacksonville. I had to sub on the last night of Thoroughly Modern Millie for the woman that usually played Bun Fu and Ching Ho's mother.
Okay.
It comes out for it's not even 5 seconds. It's literally like a blip at the very, very end, at the end of vows. It's like not even technically in the show. It's after the
Okay.
vows, and she's reunited with her sons. Spoiler alert. Um, and I played her.
That's cool.
That
Did
was
you have a
it.
line?
Yeah, I just screamed their names.
Okay.
Literally
Yeah.
from the side of the stage, just came out.
That's
Screamed their names.
cool.
They ran over and hugged me, and that was it. It went
I was
down.
actually going to say the exact same thing about how, like, I could imagine it would be important if you were designing costumes for theater productions to be able to at least relate a little bit to what the actors are going through, you know?
Yeah, and it's not necessary. Like, if
Right.
you feel like you have that understanding already and like you don't need that, or slash really, really hate being on stage. Like, if you're just
Sure.
not that person, like, then that's fine. But like, I don't know. I like seeing life through different lenses. So I feel like that's kind of a cool, I don't know. I'm always very inquisitive and curious. So I like to experience a lot of things.
That's awesome. So I know this is a lofty question, but within the world of fashion, what would you say inspires you the most? I know you talked about how you have a huge passion for history and reading. Do you feel like you gain a lot of inspiration from fashion history?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, well, and really, I think at the basis of all my interests, which basically all evolve around fashion, is telling stories through clothing. So, like, that's what history is, that's what costume is, that's what we do on a daily basis, whether we know it or not. So, I think on a major scale, I draw inspiration from just all the different stories that you get from the clothes that people wear. So it could be a costume that's literally telling a story, or it could be studying a historical garment and learning about the person who wore it and what their day-to-day life was, or if it was, somebody's beat up bullet holed jacket from some major battle in the 18th century. Like, you're learning their story and all those things that are connected, and just what you can communicate through a garment. I think that's probably the biggest inspiration for me. And then also aesthetics. Like, I'm a sucker for a good color palette and just like
Yeah.
I was saying earlier, textures and things. And then I am always inspired by my favorite stories. So like geek couture, like when I've done the Her Universe fashion show at Comic-Con,
Yep.
I'm very much inspired by my favorite characters and my favorite stories. And mostly so when it comes to the characters, I think it's mostly like traits that I see in characters that I like, that I either relate to or I really wish I had and that I would like to emulate. And so I think one of the most fun ways you can do that and to like mentally remind yourself of those things is to wear something that reminds you of them, because then every time you look down or look at your arm or look at yourself in a mirror, you're reminded of that character, that story, or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, I gotta be cool, calm, and collected like she is, or so,
Yeah.
something like that. So
Yeah. I totally get that. I actually never thought about this, but like, um, I don't know if you know this about me, but I own a lot of concert t-shirts.
no.
Yeah. Who would have thought it? But yeah, I guess I think I wear those concert t-shirts for the same reason. Like, they put me back in that show, in that moment, or how I relate to that artist or that band. And
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, whether I think about it every day or not, I pick specific shirts for a reason. Like, I know this sounds stupid, but like, if you get up and you just have one of those terrible mornings and you feel like things aren't going to go right, I'll try to put on a shirt that'll turn it around. You know what I
Oh
mean? That sounds really stupid, but like a
no,
band
not
that
at
really
all.
inspires me, jazzes me up. And then, like you
Yeah,
said, you look down and you see that, and it's like a visual reminder.
yeah. Yeah, that is not stupid at all. I do that literally every day. I mean, what I wear is definitely depends on my mood. And I've had days where I walk into work and I'm wearing like head to toe pink, like bright pink. Everybody's like, whoa, you are very bright today. And I was like, yeah, I just didn't feel that great. So I was trying to like cheer myself up. Like, I've literally said things like that, and
Yeah.
like that's kind of, I think that's the beauty of clothes, because we have to get dressed every single day. Everybody has to put on some sort of attire.
Yep.
So, I mean, my kind of motto is why not have fun with it? If
Yeah.
since we have to wear clothes, express yourself, have fun, make them make you feel good.
Yeah.
Whether that's you wake up and you're like, you don't feel great, like physically, so you put on comfier clothes. Because I've definitely had those days at work too. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
wearing my most shapeless dress I have because I have a cold and I'm tired and I just want to feel like I'm wearing a blanket. Like it's
Yeah.
we all have those days too. Like, but
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. You can choose what you are wearing to make yourself feel good. And that's what it should be about anyway.
No, that's great. I have a certain sweater that's like probably the softest sweater I've ever seen. And it reminds me when I wear it, I feel like I'm like constantly holding a puppy in my arms. So
Yeah.
that's one of my go-tos.
Yeah. I ordered, so at the beginning of quarantine, I was like, I don't really have any lounge wear because I've been so focused on work clothes and,
Yeah.
for us theme park junkies, my park clothes. And
Yeah.
like, I totally neglected my lounge wear of my aspect of my wardrobe. And so when the stay-at-home orders started and we all got furloughed and everything, like, I was like, okay, I need some clothes that I can sit around my house in and still feel fashionable. And like I
Yeah.
put in effort. So, but that didn't mean that I was gonna be like wearing gowns and stuff at home. So I was like looking for really cute, comfy clothes, and I found this sweatshirt dress, half zip hoodie dress, and it is leopard print, and it's like I actually don't know what this material is called. I tried to find it. I feel like it's like it's not really like, I don't know if you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's this really thick like Sherpa fleece, but it's extra extra soft. And it's like everybody's making everything out of it nowadays. And I actually haven't really looked too far into it because I usually don't work with fleece and stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's this leopard print thing, and it is the thickest thing in the world. Like I look at I look like a snowman when I wear it, except a leopard print snowman. But it's so comfy. It's like wearing a blanket. I put it on and I'm like, I'm wearing my blanket now. Like,
Yeah. But a little more socially acceptable.
yeah, exactly. It has sleeves, so
Yeah. So what do you do to stay motivated and creative?
So yeah, I participate in the arts. Like really, that's like in doing anything artistic is what keeps me motivated. And I mean, like that's like watching movies, TV
Yeah.
shows, looking at my favorite artists on Instagram or wherever I'm finding them, like seeing other people do really great things. I'm like, oh man,
Yep.
I could also do really great things, and like I could keep going, and just like seeing other people being creative kind of like sparks my creative juices and stuff. So yeah, probably just that. And then yeah, like I was saying earlier, like my favorite stories, movies, like if I watch Alice in Wonderland, all of a sudden I want like an entire wardrobe based off of Alice in Wonderland. So I'm like, ooh, I have extra light blue stretch velvet upstairs. Why don't I just go make something? And
That's
then
really cool.
sometimes I do and sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read a book, but it's which
Do
reading
you,
is another way actually. But,
oh, sure. Absolutely. Um, do you ever feel though, like I relate to that a lot. So taking inspiration, like you said, from other creative people and seeing them do awesome stuff. And you're like, yeah, I can do that.
yeah.
But do you ever find yourself going too far to where you then doubt yourself instead of taking it as motivation? You know what I mean? Like instead you look at somebody's stuff and you're like, oh, well, I'm not gonna be able to do that. I probably shouldn't bother.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. And I think every artist has that. There's so many talented people in the world, and you're never going to know everything. You know, there's always going to be somebody who's an expert at this one thing that you know nothing about, even if it's in your world, right? So like within the fashion world, like I know nothing about working with hard goods. So like people in costuming who make armor and helmets and things
Sure.
like that.
Yep.
I know I wouldn't know where. I mean, I could take guesses at where to start, but like I really don't know. You know, I have friends that do though, which is really interesting, and I think it's super cool. But and even just like within clothing construction, like you watch videos of these couture houses doing all of these amazing hand embroidered, hand beaded, like all of this crazy stuff. And now, especially all the new experimental things that are coming out, like Iris Van Herpen's doing all these like crazy things with plastics and shapes and like interesting ways to adhere things together. Like it's just like all this crazy stuff. So I mean, like, it can be intimidating, but at the same time I think it's mostly just encouraging, because I think you kind of realize that you're not going to be the master of everything, you
Yeah.
know. And I
Yeah.
think that took a while for me to learn, because at the beginning of my career and especially in college, I was like so intimidated by people who were better than me, and I wanted to be good immediately. I
Yep.
didn't have that practice makes perfect kind of mindset, and like I wanted to be good right then, and if I wasn't, I was like, well, I guess I'm just not good at this.
Yeah.
And it really took me, I think, going out on my own and like working, especially working in the theater. The first show I did on my own, where I was making all the creative decisions and constructing everything and managing everything. Like you have to trust yourself, and
Yeah.
you have to just like, even if you mess up, like the first show I ever did, if I could go back and do it again, I would do like everything differently, right? But I think that's probably what most people, what most especially artists say
Yeah.
about their careers. So it took me a really long time to just trust myself and be happy with where I was and what I was doing, and be excited that I still have so much more to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I feel the same way because I will follow a lot of designers, take inspiration from movies, TV, and stuff like that, right? And sometimes when I get discouraged, where like it goes past the motivation and, start thinking that you're never going to be as good as that person, most of the time, I can remind myself that that person specializes in whatever that thing is, right? Like
Exactly.
we were talking about people, I would assume that a lot of people who work in, did you say they're called hard goods? Is that right?
Well, yeah, that's mostly in costuming. I mean, I guess you could use it in fashion, but not,
Okay.
not as common. But yeah, yes, hard goods.
Right. But like I would imagine some of the people you're emulating in that realm, like that's what they do, right? Like that's what their
Oh,
focus is. I'm not saying they don't have talent in other areas, but like you said, you can't expect to be at that level for every single thing that inspires you. Do you know what I mean?
right,
Like even
right.
I've been trying to get more into photography and video. So I've been following a bunch of people on YouTube trying to get inspiration for that. And
Mm-hmm.
it does get discouraging sometimes when, you go out and do a photo shoot and you come back and you got a bunch of duds. But it's like, okay, they dedicate their entire life, plus this person's 20 years older than me. You know what I mean? Like putting everything in perspective, I think is definitely super helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I think kind of like what you were just saying, like it takes a while to realize that everybody kind of finds that one thing that they really like within
Yeah.
a certain field, and then you typically you specialize in that. Like you'll have a lot of other knowledge, but I think it's, I don't know, I think it's helpful to find something to really specialize in, as
Yeah.
long as you're okay with knowing that that's going to be the thing you're great at. Not that you
Yeah.
can't be great at other things, but I think it's just kind of like pinpointing something that you can be that go-to person for. So like if
Yep.
I wanted to be super good at embroidery, which I kind of do, like I want to just do that for a really long time, and maybe eventually I'll move on, once I do feel like I've mastered it for the most part. But like
Yep.
I want to specialize in something. I want to be really, and maybe that's knowledge too, maybe that's being like the most knowledgeable fashion historian that I could possibly be. you know, and you don't even have to figure it out right away. You can take time to do that. But I think that's something that I've found to be important to me. And like even as a designer, you know, a lot of designers don't actually construct their clothing. A lot of times when you start out, you have to do both, but eventually as you become more and more successful and you're a designer, you're not designing and constructing and managing production and all this
Sure.
other stuff. Like you're
Yeah.
just designing. So
No, that makes total sense.
yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like with experience and as you grow in your career, it's probably easier and easier to narrow it down into what that, what you're contributing. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like you
for
said,
sure.
right? As you get, especially like when you're talking about, you get more experienced, you get to a higher level, you can bring people in to help, you can build a team, and that allows you to focus where your energy needs to be, as opposed to you being stretched all over the place.
Yeah. And I think as you get older too, and you experience life and you do different things in your career, you kind of, I've found that I've seen my interests come together. Like I was saying, like I loved fashion, and then I was like, oh, I've also always loved history and reading and academics.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, fashion history is a subject. There's fashion historians, you know, like I've realized that that's something that I could get into. Whereas in college, I didn't really think about there being fashion historians. You
Right.
know, I had my one history of dress class that I absolutely loved. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess that's just the basis for my design. And I didn't even realize until later in life, after I had experience and done a lot of reading, that that was something that people could really focus on.
No, that makes total sense. So while we're on the topic of inspiration, do you have a favorite designer, or maybe somebody right now who is really inspiring to you?
Too many, way too many. Yeah.
And you can name a
Alexander,
couple.
but yeah. Alexander McQueen is always kind of my go-to answer for that. It's Sarah Burton's the designer right now, because McQueen sadly passed away a few years ago. But his work, especially in the beginning, it was so like powerful. He always had a message with his work, which I think really drew me in, kind of the multimedia aspect of it, because his runway shows were always half runway show, half performance art, and he always had a really heavy message with it. And I love, I mean, I don't think you can separate art from whatever message the artist is trying to convey. So I think I always think it's really cool how McQueen and the House of McQueen continues to bring fashion into the high art world and really show people that fashion isn't just really fluffy dresses, which I also love and adore. Who doesn't? But that it is an art, like a true art form. So that's always, and just their quality is crazy, impeccable, amazing, and just all the things. So always McQueen. I wrote down a list so that I wouldn't forget anything. Oh, Dim is another one of my favorites. I love everything they do. All their florals. They have kind of more. They have like a semi-historical aesthetic that I really like. And then Jeremy Scott is crazy and out of the box and just does stuff that people do not expect. And his big thing, and I love this, is that he always says that he just designs to bring joy to people. That's
Cool.
Any interview you hear him do, you'll hear the word joy like 5 times. Like he just wants to make people happy through these clothes that he makes and that he can put on other people. Like, I think that's such a cool thing, because I think, I mean, I was just saying that fashion is more art and stuff, and I think it is. I definitely think it is. But like, I think there can also be a tendency to take it too seriously sometimes, especially
Sure.
with the really, really high-end houses and with how much we have and like how visible it is today. It's so easy to just like overanalyze it and expect so much from it. So I love him as a designer because he's just like, I'm just having fun and I want people to love my clothes, and
Wow.
that's it. Like, he's cool. I like him a lot. Let's see. Oh, historically, I love Dior, Schiaparelli, Worth, Paul Poiret. I always forget how to say his name. Valentino, etc., etc. So yeah, lots of favorites.
No, that makes sense because you probably draw different inspiration from each of them, right? Like depending on what you're working on and what you need.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's hard to not be inspired by people who have come before. So like, kind of what we were just saying. So I'm getting my master's right now. One of my classes was just studying contemporary themes in contemporary art. And something that I read in our textbook that was really interesting was just how it's one opinion is that it is impossible to not be influenced by other artists because there's always claims of things being copied or not original and all the et cetera, but there's a chunk of artists who, and I probably fall into this category, like you can't be in the art world and be surrounded by art and expect to know about your contemporaries and people who have come before you and not be influenced by any of them, not take any inspiration from them. Like it's ludicrous to think that you could just live and work in isolation like that and be totally original, because that's really hard to do nowadays.
Yeah. So if you had to pick one of those people and you could sit down and have coffee with them, what would you want to ask them?
That's such a hard question. Probably Erdem.
Okay.
Just because I love his aesthetic so much, and I love like everything he does, like everything from how he photographs his garments to his runway shows, and I feel like we would just vibe with a lot of the things that we love. But I feel like I would want to talk about the other things that we liked and not necessarily fashion. Like I would know why he designs what he designs and like what his other interests are that kind of like flow in, and how he tries to demonstrate that through his designs.
Yeah, I totally get that because I think about that a lot too. Like I have a lot of musicians that I would like to meet, and like it's almost like you want the rest of the picture, like from their art that they put out, you get a certain side of them, but everyone gets that, right? But like if you could sit down and ask about where their inspiration comes from, like even weird stuff like what's your relationship with your family, like just
totally
to get a more holistic picture of them.
I
I think that could be really cool. Perfect. Okay, so what would be a dream job or project for you if you could choose one?
I have so many dream projects. Probably either a film or a collection that is like stylized period costume / fashion.
Cool.
So, because I love a good theme. I love movies that kind of mash up stuff. So like Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette, when Marie Antoinette was wearing Converse sneakers, and like all the colors were so bright, and I mean they were the pastels, but like every once in a while there's like a neon and things like that. Like that's so, it's expected because it's period, but then unexpected at the same time. Like I just love that mashup. It's just so interesting to me. Or like the live action Cinderella that came out a few years ago. And Sandy Powell did 1950s fashion for the evil stepmother and kind of the stepsisters, and just that super stylized mashup of time periods. I think that is super cool. And like period pieces made out of modern materials and stuff, and like it's obvious that it's kind of modern materials. I think that's really, really neat. But anything themed, give me a good themed fashion collection and I will be all about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you do to stay relevant and informed in a field that seems like it's constantly changing?
Study.
Yep.
It takes effort, and like luckily I love it. So I mean I still do the thing where I go on Vogue and I just go through shows and I just look at garments and I'm like, oh, I like this. That's really interesting. Oh, that's new. And just reading articles. I love fashion journalism too. I just read a book by Dana Thomas called Fashionopolis. It's all about the future, well, the current state of, and the future of fast fashion and sustainability within fashion. So, especially today, like that subject is so important. So, keeping up with things like that, continuing to study fashion history and understanding where we come from and why we dress the way we do and why trends move forward, because so much plays into that. I mean, it could be social, political, pop culture, anything. Like there's so many factors into why our dress evolves over time. So just really staying on top of those kind of things. It makes it sound so academic, which I'm not opposed to. I love academics and stuff. But yeah, just really staying informed and keeping up with stuff.
No, that's awesome. I think that, but that's like a distinguishing feature about a passion in your life. Like it, for somebody who doesn't share that interest, it sounds like work, but to you, it's just what you do, right? Like I'm the same way. Like people ask me all the time, like, how do you know about this new music? Like the day it comes out. I'm like, because every Friday I will put headphones in for hours and just listen to all the new stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't feel like work. That's just what I do. You know, it's like almost second nature, like breathing.
Yep. And I think it's funny because I think when you say that to a lot of people, you get this reaction of like, oh, wow, you're really into that. Or, oh, you're so dedicated. Like, I don't do that with anything. And I feel like there's so much stuff in the world nowadays and there's so much to like that I think it's hard for people to just sit down with one thing, and just study one thing or listen to a bunch of music all day or whatever it is. Like I think we're just inundated with so much stuff that we've kind of lost this specialization that a lot of people used to have.
Yeah, I never thought about that. And it's like you said, it's almost an expectation that we are not experts, but that we're familiar across the board, like,
oh yeah, we have to know everything. You have to be good, at least semi-good at everything. Like there's tons of expectations, especially with social media. If you let yourself get carried away with it, but then the people who are specialists are always the people who are, kind of have the spotlight shown on them because they've taken the time to really learn something, get great at something, and then they're celebrated for that. And not that that's your goal, like praise should not be the goal, obviously.
Right.
But like I feel like those are the people that tend to do well and be successful in whatever they're pursuing because they took the time to put the effort in.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, it almost feels like I get frustrated every time I have like conversations with people about TV shows, just because I feel the same. Like I tell my parents all the time, I wish sometimes that we could go back to where we only had 5 channels and everyone watched the same stuff, just so that it was like less stressful. Every time you like I find like I'll get super proud of myself when I'll finish a show and I'll tell people like, oh, I just finished, this was so good. And they're like, oh, but have you seen this? I'm like, what? No. I mean, I was busy with the other one. You know what I mean? And like,
yes.
You don't like enjoy one thing, and so I feel the same about interests and hobbies. And like you said, there's just so much out there to like. So it's easy for me to focus on music because I know that's what I love. And if that takes precedent over other things, that doesn't bother me. I don't feel like I'm missing out,
Yeah. Well, it's like me and my friends who are in the fashion and costume world, we talk all the time about how we don't have much of a social life, or like we feel bad when we say no to social outings or what have you because we're working on a project at home, because a lot of people probably don't prioritize that or don't realize that that is such a huge priority to you, that you have to work on whatever you're working on, because if you don't finish it, to you that's falling behind or failing or something like that. It's just what's important to you, so because I've turned down social things to stay at home and work on projects, and I have friends who say the same thing. It's like I went to coffee one time with one of my cosplay her universe community friends, and we were both like, we need to hang out more. Like this needs to be more of a regular thing. And then we
Yeah.
both started laughing because we were like, well, we say that, but we both know we're just going to be home sewing. Like it's just, you know, one of those things that thankfully when you have friends who have, mutual interests and they understand, it's
Yeah.
easy.
Sure.
But yeah, there's always those people who don't get it. And that's fine too. Like you don't have to, but
Yeah. And I will say, I do think it's very important. You do have to strike a balance somewhere, right? Like,
Mhm.
because I've seen other people, like I've had friends who dedicated their entire lives to their jobs, which it's inspirational to see that they care that much. But at the same time, you are missing out on life and other
Right.
things, right? Even though our career, especially if you find something that you're really excited about and you care about, it should be a big part of your life. But I think
Right.
making sure that you're then putting in that time to find balance and see friends so that you can recharge. And like you said, picking those relationships in your life that do improve and you don't feel like you're wasting your time. You know what I mean? Like if
Right.
you have to take a break from a project to spend 2 hours grabbing lunch with a friend, but you feel more energized afterwards, then that was the right thing to do.
Definitely, for sure.
I feel like I know you well enough that I feel like you've found the balance. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
mean, we see each other. I mean, minus the fact that we've been quarantined for 2 months.
Yeah, yeah.
Outside of
Just not-
this, we see each other pretty regularly. You know what I mean? And so I've never felt that you don't find time for family and friends. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think there's that balance. But I will remember, last year when you were getting ready for Her Universe and how much of a dedication that was. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so, hopefully you feel the same way. It must have been so rewarding to have put all of that work in and then to come out with that final product. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think it would have been worse had you, you know, stepped away from the project because somebody invited you to the movies or you wanted to go get dinner with somebody. Chances are you're not going to remember those. And then if you got to the final product and you felt like you didn't put everything you had into it, I think you would have been more disappointed. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, definitely. And thankfully, when I know, and I mean, life is just different stages, right? You're always going to have busy stages and you're going to have not so busy stages. And I think as long as you remember that, the busy stages aren't so bad, And when you have good friends, like people are going to understand. Like if you have people who don't understand, just,
Yeah, get rid of them.
you don't need them. But like, so thankfully, because I've been fortunate enough to be in the Her Universe fashion show for the past 2 years, which just in and of itself, like doing that show and being involved with that community has made such an impact on my life. Yeah, you're right. Like if I didn't spend that time dedicating myself to it and like showing up and showing like proving to other people that I am showing up and I'm taking it seriously and I am putting my all into it, like showing that respect to the other people who are involved in it, yeah, I would be very disappointed in myself.
Yep.
So but luckily when I go into those stages of my life, like I usually, I'll post about it on social media, like, oh, I got into this fashion show, or oh, I'm doing this big project, and then I'll usually kind of put a joke in it, like, see you when I come out of my cave in 3 months, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
But I think my family and friends know, if I say no to something, it's because I'm working hard on something that's really important to me, and it's
Yep.
not that I don't want to hang out.
I have to tell you, going to that show was still one of the coolest things I've ever done. It was so much fun. It was awesome. I still tell people about it.
I'm so sad it's not happening this year. I mean, it's understandable, of course, but it's
Yeah.
really just become such a staple of my year. I mean, really the high point of my year, probably. And I mean, I've only done it for the past 2 years, so maybe that sounds kind of crazy, but it's just, it was instantly just such a big part of my life. I felt like finding the Her Universe show was like, that was what I was kind of meant to do. I mean, it was validating in that I was recognized as a designer on such a huge stage, such a big platform. but also just, I mean, going there and meeting all the people who are involved and how supportive that community is and how wonderful and nice literally everyone is. It's just, yeah, it was just such a perfect thing. I'm devastated that we don't have it this year.
Yeah. And coming from somebody, like, I didn't know what to expect, because obviously I didn't get to see you there the first year, and just knew from stories that you and David had told me what it was like. I went into it as somebody who is so far removed from the fashion world. You know what I mean? Like the guy
Yeah,
who's
yeah,
wearing a concert t-shirt and basketball shorts right now.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but like, you talk about a room full of like extremely creative and inspirational, and like you said, just humble and kind people. It was so cool. Like, it was just, I felt welcome, and I wasn't even in the show. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
had I had people stopping and saying hi to me, and I was like, "You're a total stranger, but this is cool."
And honestly, I think that's nerd culture too. You know, I
Good
found,
point.
I mean, I've always been a big nerd, and but when I was younger, I wasn't surrounded with a large community like that. I had it online. I was on all the forums for all the geeky things I was into, and I was very, obsessed with all of that kind of stuff. But it's so different actually meeting and hanging out with and spending time with
Yeah.
people who are like that. And I think that's a great thing about cons and stuff. There's just this vibe. It's like so indescribable. Um, but it really is just that like supportive community. And then I think when you narrow down interest to specifically like nerdy fashion, it's like all these people coming together who just know that they all love the same thing, and
Yep.
they're all going to get excited, equally as excited about all the same stuff. You're just excited to be around people like that. But fashion shows in general are just exciting. Like any kind of
I'm
show,
sure.
that like opening night kind of feeling is
Yeah.
just so. And then fashion shows, I don't know. Fashion shows are so thrilling. Yeah, that is the cool thing about the Her Universe show, because there are so many different voices in that show, like so many different aesthetics and perspectives and stuff.
Yep.
Like the fashion show from one designer is also very exciting, but you know who you're going for. You kind of have an
Sure.
idea of who they are and what their aesthetic is. Like when you get to see new designers like that, it's really exciting to, oh, what's going to come out next? Who's next? What are
Yeah.
they like? What are they bringing to the table? So
That's awesome. So really quickly, I have two more questions for you. Um, what recommendations would you have for somebody if they also have a passion for this? You know, even if it's they want to just get more involved in the larger fashion community, or if they, possibly want to make a career out of this.
educate yourself and be patient. Because I think like when I first started, I wanted to be good and successful immediately,
Yep.
and life is not like that. Like that's not how life works. But I think you get such a momentum in college and like such a if you go to school for it, I'm just, that's my experience. Like that's how I'm going to be talking about it. But like you have such a momentum going through that, and then you get out, and what do you do then?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're just like at the very bottom of everything, and you realize, well, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what direction I want to go in. So I think it's really just staying interested and exploring a lot of different things. I mean, I came out of school and interned for one of the largest companies in the world, which was amazing and my dream, and it was perfect. But then I left and worked for community theater for 3 years because I'd never done that. And I thought it would be a good avenue to explore. And it was awesome and wonderful. And I think if I hadn't done that, I would not have some of the other experiences in life that I have
Yep.
had to have in fashion. And I wouldn't have discovered like certain interests that have led me to the point that I'm at today, where I think it's kind of like narrowing down where I'm going to go in my life, hopefully, or what I'm aiming towards at least. So
Yep.
yeah, just continuing to learn and be curious and keep being interested in things, and just take the time to make yourself as great as possible.
No, that's awesome. So do you have any way, like do you have like a fashion related Instagram or anything like that? If somebody wanted to see some of your work, is there a way for somebody to do that?
Yeah, I only have my personal one, but it's public and I post a lot of fashion things to it. So it's at kberry723. Anybody can follow me. And then I have a portfolio. I believe it's linked on my Instagram. Probably double
Um,
that, but I'm pretty sure it is.
we'll figure that out after we get off.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the last question, as I told you at the beginning, I started this whole podcast because I have this deep passion for music, right? That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I wanted to hear what other people were interested in. But I did want to see if there was a way we could tie this back in. So what I wanted to ask you was, do you have, when you're designing, do you have a certain playlist that you put on to inspire yourself, or is there something that you listen to? I don't know if you theme it based off of what you're designing, or if you just have like a catch-all.
My go-tos for sure are AJR,
Yes.
Panic at the Disco, and Fall Out Boy.
Okay.
Like those are my three. Like if I need to feel motivated and just good about myself, I listen to, because Panic, it's really like, I'm just a fangirl, right? That's like I think that's who I am at my core. I'm a fangirl of things. So I'm a fangirl, music, movies, especially fashion, so huge Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy fangirl since they both first came out, in 2004 and 5, something like that. So for a very long time. And then recently, thanks to my good friend Kevin, what's it been, like 3 years, I guess? I don't know. Very into AJR. So definitely a fangirl for them. So I'll put any of their music on. I actually, when I was working on, was it Jen? I can't remember if it was my first Her Universe outfit or Jen. It must have been Jen, because Jen Urso, my second dress, because Neo Theater was out. So, but I was like really frustrated and having a really horrible day. And I was just like, you know what? I'm working in silence. Why am I working in silence? So I just turned on AJR and listened to literally every single AJR song. I just let Spotify go through, shuffle all of them. And I felt so much better. I was like, just the difference having like the things you love sing to you or play for you or what have you. But if I am doing a themed outfit, I will theme my ambiance a lot of times. So like when I was working on my Jen Urso dress, I played Rogue One a lot, or the soundtrack. And then same when I was working on my Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas gown, I played that soundtrack pretty much nonstop. Like I listen to Nightmare all the time anyway. I think the music is so great. So yeah, sometimes I'll theme it, but a lot of times it's just my favorite music.
No, that's great. When I first came down here on my internship, I remember that if I was having a rough day, like if I had a bad meeting or like a project came up and the deadline was like 4 hours from then, I would put my headphones in, and I sat in a room with 6 other interns, right? I would put my headphones in and I would put Save Rock and Roll on, the Fall Out Boy album. Because I think it was fairly new at that point. I can't remember exactly when it came out. So that would have been like 2013. Does that sound right? Or maybe it was a little older than that. I think it was older than that.
Which one is that on? It's on Save Rock and Roll.
So anyway, I would put that album on because it's just like, it's such a good pump up album, but it's also like just the right amount of angry. And so the other interns in the room would know if I was listening to that album not to bother me. Like they would see it on my screen, or I think I probably had the volume up way too loud because they could hear it through my headphones. But that was like, I remember that album. It lasted like a solid year that I listened to that anytime I really needed to just get in the zone.
So funny. I was like trying to pull up Fall Out Boy on my Spotify, but it's not wanting to work right. There it goes. Okay. Yeah, my Feel Like a Boss song,
Yep.
if I'm having a bad day at work or something like that, is Stay Frosty Royal Milk Tea.
Okay.
Do you know that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The beginning of that song is just so hardcore. Like I think it is the most like pump up kind of boss music. Like that's what
Yeah.
I'll go and listen to. And
That's
then
my. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say when like the beginning of last year when like everything was life was weird for me and David. Like we had like that fire and flood in our apartment, and like our house kept getting delayed,
Yep.
and other stuff was happening. We listened to 100 Bad Days. Like I honestly can't even tell you how many times. Like we would
Yep.
just put it on in the car or wherever we were, and just like totally jam out, because that song is just so perfect for when you're not feeling great.
That's honestly, I think that's why I love music so much. It's just the fact that like a 3-minute song can totally change your entire outlook. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And then like you will always remember that song helped you. You know what I mean? You'll be
Yeah.
listening to the song in 10 years and still remember that it
Yeah.
helped you through that difficult
Yeah.
time. I think
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And that's the thing with like any kind of art like that, right? Like, I mean, going back to fashion too, like I have pieces of clothing that I've worn in certain periods of my life that make me feel better about myself, or, I'm like, oh, things are kind of horrible right now, and nothing in my life is ever really that horrible. I'm very lucky. Like I've been able to manage everything, but we all have bad days and stuff. And sometimes
Yeah.
there's just like, I'm like, this sucks. I'm going to wear my favorite pair of pants today. Like there's just like certain things that you associate with different parts of your life.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much for being on this episode. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, follow Goodbye Apathy on Instagram to stay connected and up to date on the latest episodes. If you're looking for more inspiration, check out our Spotify account to access the music discussed on this show. If you have a passion to share, head over to goodbyeapathypodcast.com and send us a quick note. You could be featured on a future episode.